Hello there. We're back with a new story. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories like this. Now listen, I'm not here to fool anyone, least of all myself. Whatever happened, happened. Whatever I did, I did. But believe me, when I started, not even for a second did I imagine I'd get caught up in something like this. I'm Mavis, 42 years old. I divorced my husband years ago, and thank God I did, because that marriage wasn't a real marriage. I wasted years of my life, while he carried on like nothing was wrong. One night, I just got up, took my child, and walked out the door. My son was just a little boy back then. Now he's a grown man, studying at university. I'm usually alone at home. Wake up in the morning, tidy the house, go to the market, cook. That's life, isn't it? Ordinary, monotonous. In our neighborhood, everyone knows each other. The apartment building is like its own little village. Step out onto the balcony, and you'll lock eyes with Myrtle, 3 doors down. Go to the grocery store, and the neighbor's son is working at the checkout. And gossip? Oh, there's always gossip. What's Mavis up to? Who did she meet? Who came? Who left? So when you live in a place like this, you have to be careful. And I was careful, but sometimes you just can't escape from yourself. Thaddeus, my neighbor, or rather, my neighbor's husband. We'd actually lived in the same building for years, but until recently I had never really noticed him. He's a quiet man, a carpenter. One of those old-fashioned types, neat, well-kept. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, he says what matters. He's well-liked and respected in the neighborhood. His wife, Bernadette, is always on the move, either at the market, visiting neighbors, or over at her mother's house. In the beginning, or how should I say this, back when I still saw him just as a man and nothing more, there was nothing between us. If we ran into each other at the door, it was just a good morning, and we'd move on. Sometimes we'd bump into each other at the store, exchange a quick hello, a polite smile. That was all. But sometimes your own heart plays tricks on you. If you ask me when it started, I honestly don't remember exactly. But I think the first time I truly noticed him was when I was moving my son's things. My boy was about to move into the dorm, and I was packing up his stuff. Thaddeus happened to be in the building and said, "Need a hand?" I said, "Sure." He's strong, grabbed the boxes in one go and carried them down. "You'll hurt your back. Let me do it," he said. I was so used to doing everything on my own that having someone step in like that felt strange. Something stirred inside me, but I quickly silenced it. Then I started to realize I was seeing him more often. Or maybe he'd always been there, and I was only just beginning to notice. At the corner store, in the building, while looking down from my balcony, every time our eyes met, this strange warmth would stir inside me. I kept scolding myself, "Don't be stupid, Mavis, he's a married man." But try telling that to a restless heart. One day I was sitting on the balcony drinking coffee. I looked down and saw Thaddeus lighting a cigarette by the door. Our eyes met. And in that moment, something shifted. He smiled. And I, almost involuntarily, smiled back. A warmth, a rush of excitement filled me. God forgive me, but in that moment, I couldn't stop myself. After that day, it felt like everything changed. I started looking for him everywhere. Just hearing his voice would send a shiver through me, and when he walked past me, I could barely breathe. Subtle, almost unnoticeable glances began between us. I don't know if he sensed it too, but you know how people just feel these things. That spark, that charge in the air. There was something like that between us. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was a serious sin. But I swear, sometimes people don't move with their minds. They move with their hearts. And that's the path I had started walking, slowly, unknowingly, down a road with no return. Maybe what was happening between Thaddeus and me was just something I felt on my own. Was there meaning in the way he looked at me, or was I the one starting to read too much into everything? I don't know. But a woman senses things. She sees the fire inside her reflected in the eyes of the man in front of her. I remember the moment I saw that look. We ran into each other at the store between the shelves. I reached out for an item, and so did he, at the exact same time. Our fingertips brushed ever so slightly. Such a simple, seemingly meaningless moment. But the spark I felt was strong enough to shake me. Thaddeus paused for a second, looked straight into my eyes, just like that. Then he smiled, nodded, and walked away. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just something I was feeling on my own. He knew it too. He felt it as well. And the worst part was, there would be no stopping it now. After that, everything became more obvious. Bernadette, as usual, was often away at her mother's. Thaddeus started lingering in front of the building after work. Every time I stepped out onto my balcony, my eyes instinctively searched for him. One day, while I was busy in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there was Thaddeus. "Do you have a vacuum cleaner? Ours broke, and Bernadette needs to clean," he said. Trying to keep myself calm, I invited him inside, took out the vacuum, and handed it to him. But Thaddeus wasn't in a hurry. With his hand in his pocket, he stood in the doorway. "Thank you," he said. "It's nothing. We're neighbors after all," I replied. He paused for a moment, looked straight into my eyes. "We're neighbors, yes," he said. But there was something else in his voice. For a moment, time seemed to stop at that doorstep. We just stared at each other. If something had happened in that moment, something irreversible, I swear I couldn't have objected. But Thaddeus quietly took the vacuum, turned, and walked away. That night I couldn't sleep. I was angry with myself. "What are you doing, Mavis? What are you after? The man is married." But a voice inside me was saying something else. He wants it too. One evening, the power went out in the neighborhood. I lit some candles and looked out the window. The area in front of the building was dark, but there was a shadow. Thaddeus was sitting in front of the door, smoking a cigarette. I called down again. "I made some tea. Would you like some?" He paused for a moment, looked up. "Sure," he said. The moment he stepped through that door, something inside me broke. Until that moment, I had only felt it, but that evening, everything would become real. With a tray in my hands, I went to the kitchen. My hands were trembling. I whispered to myself, "Calm down, Mavis." But my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might tear my chest apart. As I was pouring the tea, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and Thaddeus was leaning against the kitchen door, silently watching me. His eyes. That's where everything was. There was something warm, deep, burning in his gaze. He was watching me, examining me. I had no escape now. "When will the power come back on?" I asked, just to break the silence. He shrugged, didn't even answer. Then he slowly walked toward the kitchen, step by step. And with each step, something inside me was shifting. He stopped in front of me. He was so close that I could feel his breath on my face. "This isn't right," I said, my voice trembling in a whisper. "It is for me," he replied. Then he raised his hand and pushed my hair back. His fingertips glided from my temples to my cheek. It was a slow, tentative, yet determined touch. His eyes were locked on mine, as if waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't pull away. He moved from my cheek down to my neck. I took a deep breath, feeling as if my skin was on fire. I closed my eyes for a moment. His fingers gently pressed against the base of my throat, and I lost my breath. Then, he slowly leaned in. Only a breath's distance remained between our lips. While storms raged inside me, I didn't want that moment to end. And finally, our lips met. At first, it was a slow, hesitant kiss. But then, everything that had been building up between us exploded all at once. My hands went to his chest. I could feel the heat, the tension in his body. I could hear his heartbeat. Whether he could feel mine, I don't know. But when we were breathless, we both knew there was no going back. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me toward him. His chest pressed against mine, and his face was buried in my hair. His breath against my neck, his trembling hands. In that moment, I felt that nothing in the world could stop us. But it didn't end there. I don't know when I fell asleep. When I opened my eyes, the room was dimly lit. Thaddeus was standing by the window, lighting a cigarette. His back was to me, but his body was tense. I slowly sat up. "What are you thinking?" I asked. He took a deep breath, turned around. I wish we were in another world, he said, and that's when a stone settled in my chest. Because I knew this was a fairy tale, and in the morning we would return to the real world. Thaddeus got dressed and silently headed for the door. There was a desire inside me to stop him, but I didn't, because I knew this was something we couldn't bear. He left, and I stayed where I was. See you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Take care.